Hey guys, Sue's here. Welcome back to another keto dinner recipes video. If you're new here, we make these videos every single week and we always try 4 new keto diet dinner recipes to give you a little motivation to get in the kitchen and get your keto meal prep and keto cooking on. I would love for you to hit that subscribe button and join our crew. Let's go ahead and get into the video. First up this week, we made this awesome keto chicken Parmesan casserole. I was a little skeptical about this recipe when I first started, but it was so good. So to start with, I took an 8x8 baking dish, sprayed it with a little olive oil cooking spray, added 5 cups of diced chicken breast. I just cooked 4 chicken breasts in the oven, took them out, diced them up. You can see it's really chickeny. And then we're gonna add 1 cup of marinara sauce. I use Rayo's because it's delicious and low carb, but use whichever low carb sauce you prefer. I'm using a little spatula to kind of spread that out over our chicken, and it's just, pretty much going on the surface of it. To that, I did decide to add a little bit of salt and pepper straight over that sauce. And then you're going to add about 1/2 teaspoon of red pepper flakes right on top of that. To that, I'm adding a cup total of grated Parmesan cheese, and I just added it in 1/2 cup increments. And to top it all off, I used a 1.5 cups of shredded mozzarella cheese. Now, for the recipe, they did add about 1 ounce. That's about 1/4 cup of pork rind crumbs. But if you don't have those, I think you could definitely do without. And actually, the next time I make this recipe, I will probably leave them out altogether. They were good texture-wise, but I don't think you need them. On top of that, I added 1/2 teaspoon of dried basil and just sprinkled it over it. Popping the whole thing into a 350-degree oven for 25 minutes. Here's what it looks like when it comes out, and here it is plated up. This is deceptively simple and so super delicious. I was really surprised at how much my husband and I both really enjoyed this recipe. It's a great kid-friendly recipe as well, and stores and reheats excellently. Next up, we made I Breathe, I'm Hungry's keto pot sticker meatball Asian soup. So to start with, in a large mixing bowl, I'm adding 1 pound of ground pork, 1 large egg, 1/3 cup almond flour, a teaspoon of minced ginger, 1/3 cup chopped green onions. I used the white parts, the light green, and some of the regular green. A tablespoon of soy sauce, 1/2 teaspoon of garlic powder, and 1/2 teaspoon of kosher salt. And then I'm just getting in there with my hands and mixing that all together really well. Once I have it combined, I'm taking a baking sheet, lining it with some nonstick foil. You can see that I have my meat portioned kind of in half. That was just an easier way for me to kind of keep up with my portion sizes. We're just gonna make 24 of these little mini meatballs total. I just did 6 rows of 4, and then I'm gonna pop those into a 375-degree oven for 15 minutes. While those are cooking, I'm getting started on my soup. So in a large saucepan, I'm adding a tablespoon of sesame oil over medium-high heat. To that, I'm adding 2 tablespoons of minced ginger and a teaspoon of minced garlic, cooking that for about a minute until it all starts to sizzle and become nice and fragrant. On top of that, I'm adding 32 ounces of chicken broth. I always like to use the low sodium broth as it just gives me more control over my salt content. Along with that, I'm also adding 2 cups of water, a tablespoon of soy sauce, and I'm adding a tablespoon of fish sauce. You can see this is the fish sauce right here that I'm using. This has less than 1 gram of carbs per tablespoon. Make sure you shop around and find a good low carb fish sauce. Also adding 1/2 teaspoon of red pepper flakes and 1/2 teaspoon of kosher salt. I'm stirring this all together and bringing it to a boil. Once I have that boiling nicely, I'm going to turn it down and let it simmer for at least 10 minutes. Now I'm just sliding that pot out of the way, getting a smaller but deeper saucepan and a little wire mesh strainer in the top of it. I am going to strain all of that goodness out of the soup to leave the broth. This part kind of hurt my soul because I really love minced ginger so much, so I'm actually going to stick these remnants to the side and probably throw them in some other soup. I might just put them in a little bag in the freezer. So after it's all strained and we have our new pot of broth, I'm going to stir that up and also bring this to a boil, and we want to make sure it is at a boil when we serve our soup. So for our fixings, I have some spiralized zucchini. I just steamed a little bag of it in the microwave, some shredded Napa cabbage, 1 radish I cut into matchsticks, a little fresh cilantro, some cut lime wedges, some more green onion, and of course our Asian meatballs. So to assemble the soup, I'm just going to take my tongs and add no more than 1/2 cup of the zoodles to the bottom of a soup bowl. To that, I'm adding 4 of our pork meatballs. On top of that, I'm doing a handful of the shredded Napa cabbage, a little pinch of my radish sticks, a pinch of my green onions, a little pinch of fresh cilantro, And then you see my soup is still boiling. I'm just gonna take a ladle and ladle over a couple spoonfuls of this broth on top of our soup fixings. I'll let that sit for about 2 minutes before taking a lime and squeezing it over the top of it. And then you can just drop the lime in if you want or discard it if not. And there you go. That is our pot sticker soup all plated up. I love this. It's so perfect, everything about it. After I got done cooking it, this is what I did with the leftovers. I actually just piled all the rest of the fixings and the meatballs in that same pot of broth, added a little bit of the garlic back to it, and just put it in a container to have in the fridge. And I'll just squeeze fresh lime over it throughout the week for leftovers. Highly recommend making that recipe. Next up, we tried Low Carb-ology's Low Carb Manicotti. This was a really fun recipe to make. It looks a little intimidating, but it's so much easier than it looks. So to start with, in a blender, I added 2 tablespoons of softened cream cheese along with 2 large eggs, 1/4 teaspoon salt, 1/4 teaspoon garlic powder, blending this all up until it is nice and liquidy. Here's what that looks like. Over on the stove, I've got a small saute pan over medium to medium-high heat. I'm adding 1/2 tablespoon of butter, swirling that around so the bottom's fully coated. And then we're gonna add just shy of 1/4 of a cup of our crepe mixture to the pan. As soon as you add it, you want to tilt it a little. This is my first one, so I mangled it. You'll probably mangle your first ones too. Maybe not. Maybe you'll be a pro at it off the rip. But you're gonna tilt it a little until the bottom forms, and then just let it cook for a couple minutes until it sets. This first one I should have cooked even longer. I was a little weary because I was just starting it out, so I messed it all up. For my second one, I added another 1/2 tablespoon of butter, and I can show you better on this one. Added a little bit less of the mixture, and you see how I'm tilting it immediately, and you can see that it's forming like a nice solid surface on the bottom. And then just kind of shake it to even it out and let the rest of that cook about a minute. You can slide that one right out. So mangled the first one, the other ones went perfectly. Just repeat that process to make 4 total. Over in a separate dish, I'm taking a 1/2 cup of ricotta cheese. Always double check your carbs on this because some of them are sky high, some of them are very low. To that, I'm adding 1 egg yolk that I just separated. And the recipe called for a full 1/4 of a cup fresh basil. I probably only added 1/8 of a cup because my basil was going bad, and I think that was plenty, and it didn't need any more than that. It also called for 1/4 teaspoon salt, so I added that. In the future, I will leave that out because we have salt in our actual crepes, and I felt like mine was a little too salty. My husband thought it was fine. I thought it was a little too salty. That comes down to personal preference, so kind of feel that out there, but just know I thought mine was too salty. Now to assemble these into an oval baking dish, we have 1/4 of a cup pasta sauce. I'm using some of the leftover Rayos I have from the beginning of the week, and I'm adding just probably a tablespoon and a half of it to the bottom of my dish, spreading it out evenly just to give us something to work with. Here are our crepes. You can see I have 3 that look pretty nice and 1 that's a mangled mess, and I'm just going to show you how I'll put those together. So here goes 1. You can see it's already torn in the middle. I just want to show you that it doesn't matter. You don't have to make it perfect. We're going to fill these up with a couple tablespoons of ricotta per crepe. We're going to cover all of them with cheese and bake them, and you'll never know the difference if they are mangled or not. So if you mess up a couple of them, don't get discouraged because it's an easy fix. So you're just putting your ricotta in the middle. You can tuck in the ends if you want, like I did. Rolling it up. You're going to put it into your baking dish seam side down. So there's 1. Here's another one that turned out well, but it's still got that little tear because they're very delicate. A couple tablespoons of ricotta. I know I don't usually show you this much detail, but I really want you to see how you can salvage these and it can turn out okay even if you mess some of them up, because unless you're an absolute pro, you're bound to have some that rip. Again, rolled it up, seam side down, put it in the baking dish. Now let me show you how I fixed this mangled one. See, it's in like 3 parts and it just looks like regular egg. I didn't even cook it long enough for it to brown. I'm just gonna put some ricotta on it and use that to stick this together, and then boom, just fold all the little pieces in and mash them together into a little mangled mess. Look at this. Boom. Put it in your baking dish. I put cheese and sauce on top of this and fed it to my husband, and he had no idea that it was mangled underneath there. Okay, once you get those all completed in your pan, this is what it will look like. Take the rest of your sauce. I just evenly distributed mine on each. You could add more if you want, but I tried to stick with what she had going on here so that it would be 2 servings for this meal, and each one would be 5 grams of net carbs. To the top of that, I added a full cup of shredded mozzarella cheese. I placed that into a 375-degree oven for 20 minutes. When it came out, I plated 2 of them up, topped it with a little bit of dried basil. These were so delicious. Next time I make them, I'm probably going to experiment with them a little bit more. Like I said, I'll leave the salt out of the ricotta mixture, and I would like to add maybe a little meat to the sauce, play around with it a little bit. Last up this week, I have a super delicious, really easy meal that I threw together because I was just absolutely so hungry and needed to throw something together with kind of pre-cooked stuff. So this is really a keto weeknight convenience meal that I don't even have an official recipe for. Parts of it are inspired by a viewer, My Life on Keto 709 over on Instagram. Check her out. She uses Boursin cheese a lot, and I had some in the fridge, so I decided to make something with that. So to start with, in a large pot over medium to medium high heat, I added a tablespoon of avocado oil just because that's what I grabbed. You could use olive oil or any other cooking oil you prefer. And I added 2 cut up sausage links, Teton less than 1 carb a link Polish sausage. And then I found these awesome grilled chicken strips that are pre-cooked at Costco that actually have 0 carbs in them. This is a 1-pound package. I'm dumping those in there, and then I'm just gonna cook and stir these up until they get a little brown. To that, I am adding 1 pound of Kirkland's organic broccoli, I also buy at Costco, that I steamed lightly in the microwave and drained. Stirring that from the bottom. Adding 2 tablespoons of softened cream cheese I had left over from another recipe. Here's my Boursin cheese. As I said, this was inspired by a viewer. This whole block of Boursin cheese only has 5 grams of net carbs. So I'm just putting the whole block into this because this is going to be at a minimum 4 servings. Also adding in 2 tablespoons of unsalted butter that I had laying around that I wanted to get rid of. And I'm just going to stir this all from the bottom until it's nice and melted, adding probably 1/4 of a teaspoon of sea salt and a little bit of ground black pepper, and just stirring this until all of that Boursin cheese is nice and melted, and that really gives it all of the flavor it needs. How quick and easy can you get? And if you don't have the specific chicken, you could always cook your own. If you eat rotisserie chicken, you could shred one of those up and put it in here. You could use any kind of sausage. You could really use any kind of meat to throw something like this together. Here it is plated up. I topped it with a little bit of shredded Parmesan cheese. This was so stinking delicious, and I'll definitely be throwing something like this together again. That's this week's keto dinner recipes video. If you enjoyed it, please give us a thumbs up. It really encourages us to keep making these videos for you. Comment down below if you have any recipe suggestions that you would like to see us tackle. Share this video with any of your friends that are trying to follow a keto diet. And be on the lookout. We actually have a special keto lemon desserts video that is coming out on Wednesday. And in it, we cook 3 different keto lemon desserts, as well as share with you one of our favorite keto lemon snacks. So be on the lookout for that. And then I'll see you back next weekend for another keto dinner ideas video.